what would you say are the top foods using this food as medicine approach to prioritize in one's diet for longevity?
I think it really starts with defining what is longevity. And to me, it's actually living as long as you possibly can, but living as well as you can, enjoying it while you're actually getting there, right? So there's no number that you can actually go for longevity. It's really not like booking online for a movie theater seat. Can't do that. And so really I think it's about finding out in a very personal way what works for you that's lined up with getting you to where you want to be. And by the way, one additional thing that's critical is not to get taken out by the diseases that rob us of those years.
And so what are those diseases?
The things that take us out before our time, those are the real thieves of longevity, right? So where everybody's trying to get to the next frontier, but on the other hand, we've got home invaders coming in through our side doors and coming in through our windows we got to deal with. So what are the common ones? We're really talking about diabetes, metabolic disease. We're talking about cancer. I'm a cancer researcher, so I know all about that. Amazing progress being made in that front. Cardiovascular disease, which isn't just about the heart, it's about the brain. You want to live long, you want to have good cognition, right? Mm-hmm. You want to be able to remember, you want to be able to problem solve, you want to be able to enjoy. It's all in our heads, so to speak. So I always think that don't just focus on the horizon. Focus on the present, on your way to the horizon.
I like that.
First of all, we all want to live as long as we possibly can. And to me, longevity is living as long as you're possibly able to, but as well and having a good quality of life along the way, right? So everybody wants to live as long as they can, but you don't want to be living to whatever crazy numbers that people are spouting, 150, 200, 300 years old. You hear these numbers from the sort of the people who are ultra biohackers who are, really dreaming of super longevity, right? Like I've even heard the term, I think Peter Diamandis said this, escape velocity of aging. How do you escape? So you're just going to live forever. And I think that's an intriguing idea, but I think it misses the point of our humanity. We all just want to, if all you do is focus on the horizon, that distant point, and you don't focus on what is in front of your headlights, you're really going to be missing a lot of your life, especially, and maybe giving yourself a false promise if you just actually give a part. So some of the myths are like, for example, that your genetics determine everything about whether you're going to live long or not. It is true. If your grandfather, great-grandfather, your family members lived a long time, you're probably going to have a better chance, hopefully with better genetics, to drive your vehicle for a longer period of time, the vehicle being your body. My great uncle, for example, lived to 104 years old, completely intact and cognitively clear. I don't know. I hope I got something from him.
Was he here in the States? Or
he lived in China.
Okay.
Drank green tea, probably 6 to 10 cups of green tea every single day of his life. And he was very physically active, and he was really plugged into his community, had a big support. He kept his mind really active. And so, these are again, recurrent themes of people who live a really long time.
Could I interrupt you for 1 second? You're such on a roll, but I'm so fascinated about your uncle.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody's individual situation is different, but from your research end, from your food end, and obviously he was a family member, if you had to rank, obviously genetics play a little bit, as you mentioned, they're not everything. If you had to rank the things that he was doing that probably played the biggest role in his long, but more importantly, healthy lifespan, even for somebody to live to 80 in America, but not be on prescription drugs and be healthy and their brain is sharp, that's even super rare. And meanwhile, your uncle, great uncle, is living to 104. What do you think were the biggest things that played a role?
You know what? I actually asked him this.
Yeah.
I asked him this because I went to his 100th birthday, which he planned. He made the guest list. He selected the food. All right. And he hosted, like, as the talkative host. All right. It was an amazing event for me. The first time I had ever personally known somebody, in this case, a family member, who turned 100, and I could see what it could be like. And so before we actually got to the actual birthday party, I arrived a little bit early, and this was in China. And I talked to him, and I'm like, okay, you got to tell me right here, right now, like, what is your secret? Like, when you look back, what insights could you share? And I think the answer is pretty typical. He basically said, I don't know if there's a stock answer I can give you that's going to work for everyone, but I'll tell you. But he told me, here's what was important for me. If I had to look back at it, he said, number one, I let things roll off my shoulder. I don't carry my anger. I don't carry resentment. Things are just not that important for me to actually kind of get too wrapped up in it, no matter what it is. And he's like, he's always been that way.
So the mindset first, right? Mindset, psychology.
Lower stress, and I think there's a little bit of self-care in there. Like, he would rather pay attention to things that he cares about rather than what other people care about, and he let a lot of things in. And he specifically talking about anger. He's like, let the anger roll off. It's not a big deal. It's not worth it. Okay. And I still to this day remember that whenever I get into a situation where I get riled up, I'm like, maybe it's not that important. Okay. And that's just been helpful to me. So mindset, absolutely. The second thing he said is he's like, he lived at the base of this mountain that grew tea. And he said, I drink tea my whole life. He's like, I grew up in this house my whole life. I've been drinking green tea that is fresh from the mountain, freshly picked, seasonally picked. He's like, I know all the people and all the places that were picking the tea. And he's like, and I just drink it, sip it all day long. And he was a big believer in drinking green tea. And of course, the scientific evidence has shown the catechins, the polyphenols in green tea actually, and if you get dietary fiber, if you have the powdered tea like the matcha, if you actually have catechins from regular tea earlier in the season, you don't have as much caffeine because caffeine is developed by the tea plant as its own insecticide, natural pesticide. Early in the season, there are not that many bugs around, so the caffeine is very low. But he would just sip tea all day long. And the third thing he told me, was that he had to walk to the tea temple kind of place where he would sit with his friends every day. He had to walk and exercise to get to his tea. And those three things, mindset, trying to be a little chill, a lot of green tea over many decades, and then exercising. And then he's hanging out with buddies, that classic idea you see like these old guys hanging around playing chess or whatever it is they were doing, or just having conversation or just sitting around and looking. I remember there was, because I went up with him one morning. I got up at 4 a.m. and I walked with him because I wanted to see what it was like. I want to walk in the shoes of this guy who's about to turn 100 and see what he does to see if I could imagine myself doing that. So we walked up these stone steps. I mean, listen, the dude was like 99 plus, right? This was just a few days short of 100. And he was walking up uneven stone stairs. Okay. And probably the same way that people in Sardinia, in Ikaria, Greece, maybe in Okinawa, in these old cultures where people are living really well. And I was having a chat with him the whole time, and it was social, exercise, diet with green tea in his case, and mindfulness. Actually, if you really bring it back down to the things that you hear everybody saying, what's the common denominator? Take care of your mind. Don't get hung up on things. Take care of yourself. Eat in healthy ways. Choose your weapon of health. Not weapon of destruction, weapon of health. It's going to be your health defense that you're activating your body. Be social, exercise.
Yeah. And there's probably a lot of things within that he also wasn't doing. For example, like my guess is, not knowing your great uncle, but he probably maintained a healthy body weight throughout his life, which is a part of it.
Yep.
And obviously these habits and things like
contribute to
green tea and other things like that contribute to that and help support the natural metabolism that we all have. He's not having, ultra processed foods on a regular basis.
By the way, I do remember another thing he told me on a previous visit that I had with him before his 100th birthday. And I can't remember how old he was at the time, but I was so curious to, and I think we should all do this more if we're fortunate to be able to have elders in our family or our community that we can actually speak to, just to get the wisdom of experience and age. I think that we're so focused on ourselves in here now. Like, I think there's a lot to be gained from talking to other people, just as examples, good and bad, right?
It's one of my favorite things to do.
But when I do remember another deep piece of advice he gave me. He always said, live a life of moderation, be moderate, even with moderation. And what he did is he say, don't be excessive all the time, but every now and then give yourself a chance to blow it out and do the things that you want to do, not moderately. And so, like I always thought, wow, that's a pretty deep thing. Like be reasonable most of the time, but every now and then give yourself the freedom to go do something that's a little extreme. And so anytime I want to do something extreme, I remember what my family member advised me.
What's the sidebar before we get back to longevity and that, great role that you were on? What's something extreme in Dr. Lee's world?
Oh, you know what? I love to explore new foods.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will just go, so most of the travel you're talking about to Italy or Greece or Japan or whatever, I'm researching. I'm actively researching, and I'm going to markets. I'm going to restaurants. I'm talking to people. I'm trying to find out something new, and I listen to people. So if somebody I meet in the Mediterranean encourages me to try a food, and it might have some animal fat in it, it might not look so healthy, but they really want me to try it because they're really proud of it, and they think that this is something that's important for me to know about as I research it. I'll sit down and try it, and I'll feel like I'm walking on the ledge a little bit, because it doesn't look that healthy. And you know what? It's part of my experience. I'll get to sample it. I might not eat it again, but then I've actually tried something new. So I'm never afraid to try a new experience that can give me a better insight into the world, but also into myself and how I react to it.
Yeah, that's an important philosophy.
My research is getting into longevity because it's one of the most exciting topics out there. We're learning more about how to do healthy aging than we've ever known before. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is to figure out what is the actual fact of longevity. So how many people do you think are alive today who are 100 years old or older?
My guess would be in the ballpark of maybe 25,000.
All right. The answer is 722,000 people are age 100 or older today. Mind-blowing fact. Mind-blowing because, we don't really think about getting to 100 as a realistic or achievable goal. But the fact that there's almost 750,000 people who have already done it without implantable glucose sensors, without being biohackers, it tells you something, right? So that to me is one of the exciting reasons to dive into this whole space.
That is very exciting. And just to know, again, without all of there's great innovations that are happening right now, but a lot of people have figured certain things out. And if you could, I also want to dig in on a surprising fact that is related to their longevity. And this might have something to do with their gut health.
Okay. So I started to get into looking at gut health with gut microbiome, which are the 39 trillion healthy bacteria that are in our gut that do all kinds of things, as we know. Lower inflammation, they release short-chain fatty acids, they talk to our immune system, 70% of which is in the wall of our gut. They text message our brain, the old gut-brain axis, control our lipid metabolism, our insulin sensitivity. Pretty much air traffic control for our health lives inside our gut, right? So we're normally thinking about this. I started out looking at gut health in cancer patients. I'm a cancer researcher, and we now realize that if you have cancer and you're being treated with a very advanced therapy called immunotherapy, which relies on your immune system, the most natural way of treating cancer you can imagine. Let your own immune system knock it out. If you don't actually have the right gut microbiome profile, you're not likely to respond to cancer therapy. That's not optional. That's life or death, right? So that's how I got into the gut microbiome. The other thing that that got me into this is wound healing. So, a lot of people, if you cut yourself, you and I are probably going to heal pretty fast. But if you have type 2 diabetes and you cut yourself, it might take a long time to heal. And you might have a wound on your foot that you can't see. And that thing will just not heal until it becomes infected. And then it can lead to gangrene and amputation and all this kind of stuff. So I spent part of my career helping to develop brand new angiogenic blood vessel stimulating ways to quickly heal wounds. Very successful. But then I had a discovery with a colleague of mine at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that certain gut microbiome, certain probiotics can speed your wound healing. So, I'm just telling you like how I got into this field. So with that, with wound healing and diabetes and with cancer and treatment outcomes, I started to really take this toolkit and start to ask myself, how do we apply this in longevity? And the natural curiosity is, are people who are super agers, do they have anything special about their gut? It's the last thing you think about, right? Like some old dude, like how are you going to actually study their gut? Well, guess what? It's no different than actually studying a young dude. Okay, a young person's gut microbiome. You get a swab, you swab their poop, send the tube away, and now 15 years ago would have been very, very difficult to actually study the gut microbiome. We didn't have the software. We didn't have the sequencing. We didn't have the baseline database to even know what to look for. Fast forward to today, we got it. So it's possible to do research now that we couldn't do, 15 years ago. So amazing research I want to share with your audience is that a study was done in Italy, Bologna, Italy. They looked at adults across all their entire spectrum of adulthood, 20 to 40, 40 to 70, 70 to 90, 90 to 100. And then they actually looked at people who are 100 to 114, super agers. Okay, that's like an entire adult lifespan. They looked at their gut microbiome, and then they used computational biology to ask within the age categories, and especially with the superagers, 100 and above, any gut bacteria pop out as super high, like standout bacteria that you didn't see in other populations. And it turns out for the people who were 100 years old or older, there are 4 bacteria that are standouts. Want to hear what they are?
Yes, I do.
Okay. One of them I know you've heard of. 3 of them I hadn't heard of. All right. And this is the exciting part, like being a scientist and a researcher. I mean, you probably appreciate this as much as anyone else. Like the excitement of discovery in biology is like why we do what we do. It's cool. One of the bacteria is called Odoribacter, O-D-O-R-I bacter. Second one is called Oscillobacter, like oscillation bacter. Another one is Cristalensis. Okay. And then the fourth one is Akkermansia. These 4 bacteria are standouts more of these bacteria in these superagers than you see in any other group, and that stand out at higher levels when they get to this age. What do they do? Okay, now we know Akkermansia boosts your immune system, lowers your inflammation. We know that it helps to regulate blood glucose. We also know that Akkermansia, we actually think that Akkermansia might actually interfere with the development of dementia, somehow regulating brain health. And then the latest piece of discovery about Akkermansia, it's a bacteria. All right, so bacteria have a shell around them physically. They're like a beetle. A beetle's got a little shell, like the bug. There's a particle on the shell of Akkermansia. I don't know if you heard about this. Have you heard of P9? Okay, P is in Peter. Number 9 is a newly discovered particle on the shell surrounding Akkermansia. All right, and you know what they found out is that if you take a live Akkermansia bacteria and blow it up into a million pieces, you just kill it, like pulverize it. The P9 will still have a beneficial biological effect if it's floating around. So it's like a piece of shrapnel from Akkermansia that's still biologically useful. And you know what it does? It causes your gut to secrete more natural GLP-1.
Wow.
Mind blown, right? So now you know this is the bacteria that's doing a lot of things. And it's even got its own, vest of little tricks in its shell. Anyway, so that's one of the bacteria. These other bacteria do things like lower inflammation, fight specific harmful bacteria like E. coli. So, think about it. As you get older, most
people who get to that elderly age, they don't die of heart attacks, they die of infection, pneumonia, and all this other kind of stuff. So, one of these bacteria seems to really, really mount a good defense against the kind of infection that might take you out. Other ones that you smooth out your metabolism, lower your bad LDL cholesterol and improve your good HDL and lower your triglyceride level. Other ones seem to improve better circulation. These are not surprises once you actually break down what these bacteria, these 4 bacteria, are involved with in terms of your physical health. Makes total sense. And these guys, these centenarians and older, okay, because I had never considered when I first started to take a look at longevity, I thought, like 100 is like, all right, that's like a good peak to begin looking at. But I had no idea, like, okay, let's just do a dive on the deep end of the pool and look at their gut microbiome and look at all this stuff. And guess what? You can eat foods that can stimulate these bacteria to grow.
Amazing. Amazing. I never even thought about how many people are on planet Earth right now that have lived to be over 100 years old. I've never even thought about that question. We know that there are these hot spots that have a lot of centenarians, right? Yeah. And I think it's so fascinating that this research was done in Bologna, because this is the hub of baloney. Comes from this great part of the planet. And the diversity in diet is one of the things that's finally being talked about in regards to blue zones. There isn't a particular diet template. It is very, very varied. But one of the consistencies, of course, is that these people are eating real food, regardless of the spectrum from...
And different kinds of real food.
Yes, diverse. The diversity is huge. And also, again, on that range from plant to animal food, that percentage is going to change. But what doesn't change is real food and diverse in all of the real foods that they're eating.
Well, and this is something that makes a lot of sense to how our bodies are designed. If you look at our jaws, you look at our teeth, you look at sort of our digestive system, we are, through evolution, designed to be omnivores. We can tackle pretty much anything you want to put in. Now, obviously, you put bad stuff in, and your body's going to respond in a bad way. You put good stuff in. So there's a wide range. We've got a repertoire. Like, we got the mixed martial arts of digestion and processing foods that we're hardwired with. And that's a good thing, And yes, there are lots of different philosophies and approaches and practices of how to eat healthy. But I think you nailed it. Diversity is key.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm bringing that specific point up. It's a great segue in this conversation about the importance of a healthy gut microbiome. One of the hallmarks that we've seen in the data, if you want to improve your gut health, you want to improve the inputs, bring in more diversity of inputs for your microbiome, because basically these microbes cannot thrive without their own unique kind of food that they enjoy. And they can't make the good stuff for us if we're not taking care of them.
Right. They're, like our gut bacteria are no different than any other pet we might actually have in our home. You got a pet dog, pet cat, pet parakeet, pet goldfish. Same deal. You got to be feeding them every day. Got to feed them higher quality food if you want them to last longer, And how do our, like, especially the furry pets, pay us back with attention, with affection, like it forms that bond, that connection? Well, that's happening at a microscopic level in our gut. Like we now realize that we've got to take care of, like the pregnant mom saying, like, I'm eating for 2, we're actually eating for 39 trillion bacteria.
Wow. That's a bar. That's a bar right there.
People talk about health span, but health span is just a word that goes back to health, which itself is kind of an objective word. It's a term, But when I tell you quality of life, enjoying life, you're hearing that and you're already imagining what it would mean for you. And so that, to me, brings our humanity back into it. So for me, one of the ways I'm looking at longevity is really thinking about our humanity. Who we are, what's important to us as individuals, as communities, as people along the way. I think that's really how you get a fuller picture of it. So I totally think, all the people working in a lab on the hallmarks of aging and the biological and the cellular, the senescence, the mitophagy, all that stuff, amazing. They're the building blocks or the bricks being
place into the brick wall to understand what's going on with aging and how to counter, unhealthy aging. I'm actually trying to take a little bit of a larger humanitarian or our humanity oriented look at it, which is to look at the quality. And things that are particular interest to me are cognition, brain health, so important. Brain's not a black box anymore. It's still a lot we don't know. But did you know, since we're talking about the microbiome, did you know that the brain has its own microbiome?
This was theorized for years, but
True.
now we know.
Now we know. You're back, listen, when I went to medical school, I was told in no uncertain terms that the brain is sterile.
Sterile environment.
Sterile environment. You do a tap of the spinal cord, and if you're tapping into the fluid around the brain, there's no way in heck you're going to find any bacteria in that unless you've got meningitis or some kind of brain infection, right? Well, we now have, within the last few years, like really nailed it down that there is a bacteria ecosystem in our brain, like in our gut brain. And you know what? The brain bacteria are not quite as diverse as in the gut, but about 20% of the diversity of the gut bacteria is also in the brain.
Wow.
Undiscovered country. Think about that. I mean, what could we be doing? I mean, could we be treating in the future neurodegeneration using a probiotic? How cool would that be? And in fact, there's some good data already. Like I was really struck by some of these bacteria. So, you get your gut microbiome checked, you get a huge amount of information. Hard to know what to do with if you're not like regularly, and if you're not an expert in the field, okay? But we do know a few bacteria that are standouts. And I think that knowing some of these standouts, like the Akkermansia I mentioned earlier, well, there's a new one, a new kid in town called Lactobacillus plantarum. Now, if you go buy a typical probiotic, like anywhere you order, you'll find a lot of times it's got Lactobacillus plantarum, but there's a version of it that's called PS128. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
This thing has been shown to level off the symptoms, like pretty much stop the progression of Parkinson's disease. Bacteria, brain interaction. I don't have the answer to, I don't have the explanation to how it works, but wow, what a phenomenal find, because it opens up a whole new gateway for us to try to figure out how to solve these previously unsolvable problems.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, when the explosion happened in the conversation about the microbiome, and it really just kind of rose in popularity and discussion, there's always going to be certain entities that are trying to capitalize on this. And the truth is, we still just didn't know very much.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're really starting to know some cool stuff.
Yeah.
But this piece of the brain biome this is a revelation. Like, this is one of those moments for us to just we need to really take a moment and take this in. And for me, it is kind of obvious because if you think about what we are an ecosystem, literally from head to toe. And to think that this one part of our brain our body is off limits, but we know we have a skin microbiome, we have a gut microbiome, a lung microbiome, heart microbiome, our brain, of course. But the interaction, the communication of all of this is what it's really about, and understanding that we've now identified a certain species of probiotic, a certain species of microbes that can essentially reverse or put a halt in neurodegenerative conditions. Like, you start to see this interplay. Now, our problem is we tend to okay, I just need to take a bunch of this probiotic and it's going to solve all the problems. And we have this system, and I want you to talk about this, of medicine and also even supplementation can be well-meaning, but it's trying to isolate and find this one, quote, miracle cure or the smoking gun in a situation, and negating the whole. Because you can bring a powerful thing into, we'll just say, into an Olympic swimming pool, put a drop in there, but you've got this entire swimming pool that it's fighting against.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that's like my approach to research is you have to sort of start with acknowledging the complexity and dive into the complexity to try to find out what might be some of the turnkey things that can still work in spite of the complexity. Okay. And, and that's why I think that the microbiome, like it's easy to jump to the conclusion by excited, motivated, inspired, and well-meaning people that, oh my God, we got a solution. Let's go create a probiotic and everybody should buy it, subscribe to it, and go to refilled every month or every 3 months. We're at the tip of the iceberg. And the iceberg is really, really exciting because every bit we're uncovering is telling us just how important this actually is. But like everything else in science, you go from excitement to wondering, like, how do we really apply this and will it actually work? And I can tell you this as a cancer researcher. We've cured cancer in mice over and over again. It's like a no-brainer how to do it, to be honest with you. If you're talked to an experienced cancer researcher, you're a mouse with cancer, no biggie, all right? Translating that to people has been climbing Mount Everest, okay? You can get to the top. People do get to the peak of Everest, but it's not easy. And a lot of failures. I mean, the road to the tip of it, to the summit, littered with the bodies of failed efforts, right? Okay, same thing with all this. And that's why I'm super excited by where the science of longevity, geroscience, is actually going.